From Church Militant Studios, this is the Church Militant Evening News.
Hello and thank you for joining us this Wednesday, March 15th. I'm James Fedewa, along with Hunter Bradford here with Catholic News and Context. Tonight, most of the time, liberal prelates express heterodox opinions. Not this time, though. Most of the faithful will disagree with this view of the Francis papacy, and leaders in the Vatican are reiterating calls for peace in Ukraine.
Leading us off tonight, Pope Francis's top aide is no bundle of joy, but even he doesn't like what's coming out of the German synodal path. On Monday, Cardinal Pietro Parolin said in a statement, a local particular church cannot make a decision like that, which involves the discipline of the universal church. Parolin continued, there must certainly be a discussion with Rome and the rest of the churches in the world to clarify what are the decisions to make. These comments come after the final meeting of the German Synodal Way over the weekend, where German clergy and laity voted to recognize same-sex unions and women priests.
As traditional Catholics look back with a heavy sigh on these last 10 years of Pope Francis's papacy, San Diego Cardinal Robert McElroy is rosy about it. After comparing Francis to Mother Teresa, he praises the pontiff's spirituality, his personality, and his alleged successes as Vicar of Christ. One of the newest cardinals in the Catholic Church touched on Pope Francis's comment, "Who am I to judge?" back in 2013, saying, "A second thing is that one statement the Pope made in reaction to a question on the plane returning from Rio, 'Who am I to judge?' That has resounded widely and had tremendous positive effects. Jesus speaks about the sin of judgmentalism more than any other single sin in the gospel repeatedly because it is so easy for us to fall into it."
Along with McElroy, many are looking back at the past decade of Francis's tenure, but with a less optimistic note. For instance, Damian Thompson's article over at unheard.com stands out as a good summary. Thompson points out, Francis's papacy has been marked by confusion and scandal from the 2013 conclave all the way to now. One of the many scandals he points to is Pope Francis's handling of Bishop Gustavo Zanchetta. In 2015, graphic gay sex pictures of Zanchetta and young men were found on Zanchetta's phone. But ironically, in 2022, Pope Francis created a new job in the Vatican just for Bishop Zanchetta. As Thompson notes, Zanchetta would still have the job if he wasn't sentenced to 4.5 years in jail last year for sexually assaulting 2 seminarians as bishop.
Since the early days of his papacy, Pope Francis turned many heads across the globe with his infamous "who am I to judge" mentality. But the pontiff has had no problem singling out a specific group of Catholics. In tonight's Indepth report, Church Militant's Aidan OConnor takes a closer look at so-called rigid Catholics.
In 2013, the first year of Pope Francis's papacy, he released the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, speaking about the joy of being a missionary church and the need for so-called ecclesial renewal. In it, the pontiff harshly warns against parishes he claims have become a, quote, useless structure out of touch with people. Pope Francis urged the faithful to abandon the complacent attitude that says, "We have always done it this way." He promoted an innovative approach, writing, "I invite everyone to be bold and creative in this task of rethinking the goals, structures, style, and methods of evangelization." Then, the Holy Father harshly turned on a specific group of Catholics, accusing them of adopting, quote, adulterated forms of Christianity. The Pope condemned the self-absorbed Promethean neo-Pelagianism of those who ultimately trust only in their own powers and feel superior to others because they observe certain rules or remain intransigently faithful to a particular Catholic style from the past. He calls this spiritual worldliness and claims it hides behind the appearance of piety and love for the Church while actually being a, quote, ostentatious preoccupation for the liturgy, for doctrine, and for the Church's prestige. Over the course of his papacy, Francis has frequently used the term rigid to describe traditional priests and laity. Often, he has warned rigidity is a serious problem. In 2018, one young Catholic wrote a personal letter to Pope Francis, pushing back on the Pope's targeting of Orthodox faithful. The author wrote, "Tradition is for the young. Unfortunately, when many of us express our love for tradition, we are insulted and unfairly labeled ultra-conservatives. The young people who desire tradition are not rigid." In 2019, DC-based Monsignor Charles Pope responded to the pontiff's attacks, dryly noting, "I'm not feeling the love here. I don't feel accompanied by you. I am wearied from being scorned and demonized by you." Many Catholics see the 2021 Motu Proprio Traditionis Custodes as proof the Holy Father views so-called rigid Catholics as a threat to the Church.
While Pope Francis seeks to champion love, acceptance, and accompaniment, Catholics can't help but notice his own harsh and seemingly prejudiced statements. And here to join us with more is Aidan OConnor. Aidan, thank you for that report.
Thanks, James. It's good to be on.
Good to have you on. So, Aidan, over the last 10 years, Pope Francis has just been an enigma to many, many Catholics around the world. When did he start attacking and going after these so-called rigid Catholics?
Thanks, James. That's a good question, because a lot of people think this has started recently. But I remember, so back in 2013 when Pope Francis was elected, I was not Catholic yet. It was quite a few years before I became Catholic. But I remember my grandparents, very charismatic Catholics, rejoicing over this new Pope. And I was kind of like, okay. And they were, oh, he's a Pope for the people. He's a Pope for the age. He's so loving and accepting and bringing people into the Church. What I later found out, once I became Catholic, was this started right away. A lot of people don't realize this. The rigid comments started surfacing later. But within the first year of his papacy, as I stated earlier, in the apostolic exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, he starts, if you dig in there, he singles out, he's calling traditional Catholics Neo-Pelagian, Promethean, Catholics who like a style of Catholicism from the past, and he's really digging in if you dig into that exhortation. So the roots are right there. He really starts, and obviously it comes out later, and obviously with the latest Motu Proprio Traditionis Custodes and the following unraveling of that, we see that really coming into being, that what was present there in the first apostolic exhortation, he had something out for that group of Catholics.
Yeah.
So,
and Francis repeatedly urges Catholics, especially clerics, to go to the peripheries and serve the lowliest, go out to people on the margins. What about the rigid? Do they not deserve his help and accompaniment as well?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the irony of all this is, while being the champion of love, acceptance for the environmentalists and the homosexualists and the people who hate Catholicism, largely, he is pushing a lot of faithful Catholics who love the Church, love their faith, and are doing their best. He's pushing them into the peripheries. And so as we've seen that unfolding, we're starting to see also a different side. Well, first of all, with this rigid comments, it's kind of interesting. He's not calling the homosexualists rigid. He's not calling the environmentalists rigid. He's calling Catholics rigid. And we've also, alongside this, we've seen perhaps a different side of Francis that he might not want many people to see. We actually have a video of that, I believe from 2020, of him kind of lashing out at somebody who's just adoring him and excited to see him. So we'll pull that up here.
She probably traveled so far to see him for that.
He was very excited. But obviously everyone slips up now and then, but we've also seen comments of him using profanity with seminarians and private audiences. So there's definitely a side to Pope Francis that's perhaps rigid itself that he doesn't want people to see.
Yeah, exactly. And he seems to be saying one thing but doing another. Aidan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, James.
God bless, Aidan.
All right, gentlemen. The Vatican is pushing for peace in Ukraine. Yesterday, the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, declared, quote, the first step should be a ceasefire, as he spoke to reporters at a book launch. He communicated Pope Francis's wish to visit both Russia and Ukraine and hopefully meet with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. Yesterday was also the 10th anniversary of Francis's pontificate, which Parlin commented on, saying of the 10 years, quote, "They have given the Church the possibility of being heard in the world."
Chaldean Catholic Patriarch in Baghdad is reflecting on the last 20 years since the U.S. invasion. Cardinal Luis Rafael Sacco recently spoke about the chaos in Iraq since the U.S. intervention on March 20th, 2003, proclaiming, "Under Saddam, Christians did not enjoy greater freedom, but they could benefit from a certain climate of security. Following the invasion, a climate of fear began to reign, which fueled the great hemorrhaging of a population that was reduced from over 1.5 million to about a third."
Polish prosecutors are revealing surprising results from a 3-year-long investigation into the death of an influential priest. Poland's justice minister and prosecutor general yesterday announced communists poisoned Father Franciszek Blachnicki to death in 1987. During a press conference, it was said Father Blachnicki was considered a threat to communism because, in part, he organized one of the largest religious renewal movements of his day. Pope Francis named Blachnicki venerable in 2015 after recognizing the priest had lived a model Christian life of heroic virtue. When we come back, a convicted con man priest takes his expertise to charities. And this school is getting sold to help cover diocesan sex abuse payouts. Stay tuned, all that and more up next. Thank you for watching the first half of Church Militant Evening News.
If you would like to watch the rest of today's episode, please click the link in the description, and we'll see you at churchmilitant.com. God love you.